Hey everyone, so today we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started on the first session from the Passion. I did a live review on the first, kind of like not a review of the Passion, but more of an overview of kind of some of the things that stuck out to me when I watched the stream on the 31st. But today we're going to go back into it, and it's going to be the first of several. I'm splitting each session, so each speaking session is going to have two videos. The first one, which is what I'm doing right now, is the first of two for Sadie Robertson Huff, is going to be looking at her actual preaching and kind of her teaching and the lecture. We'll be looking at the verses she used. I'll be using my Logos 9 software to really get into the verses and look at what's going on there in the original languages. And then there's also going to be a second video, probably a little bit later on this week. I'm going to try and do all of the first round of videos uh, as one setup, and then I'm going to go back through and do the prayers as a second setup. The second video, like I just said, is about the prayer. I was at a sermon 2 weeks ago, and the pastor talked a lot about how listening to the prayers that preachers did for their congregation and things like that was some of the most powerful shaping of his beliefs. And so I think it'll be really cool to rather than just bowing our heads and praying along with these, but actually looking at them from the Passion and trying to take a closer look at what we can learn from those prayers. So like I said, today is primarily going to be on Sadie Robertson, and if you will give me just a few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a share screen so that way we can watch that while I walk through it. So give me just a second. One second. How do I... All right, I'm having some technical difficulties, so I'm just going to have to react to it while I watch it. I cannot share screen for some reason this morning. I'll upload another video later on of the actual session with some additional thoughts, but this is just going to be, you'll be watching me watch it basically.
Happy New Year! Let's go! Awesome! Y'all, I am so excited. Who's excited that we are taking off together?
So in the first couple of minutes, something that Sadie talks about is the passion, the primary passion verse. So I'm gonna go ahead and go ahead and pull up Isaiah 26:8, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about what's going on in the Hebrew from what I can see. So this is Isaiah 26:8. All right. So in the New American Standard, 1995 edition, it says this, Isaiah 26:8. This is the same verse that she talks about as kind of the Passion. This is the verse that Passion has at their background. Indeed, while following the way of your judgments, O Lord, we have waited for you eagerly. Your name, even your memory, is the desire of our souls. This is a little bit of a different translation than what she used. Hers reads this: Yes, Lord, walking in the way of your truth, we wait eagerly for you. For your name and your renown are the desire of our souls. So, kind of the key points that I want to really hone in on here in this verse, that again, this is Isaiah 26:8, is the memory. It's the idea of the name and memory of God being the desire of our souls. And then at the top, while following the way of your judgments. Those two sections are going to be the primary focus of kind of this first little digging into what's going on here. So let's go ahead and take a look at. All right, sorry about that. I had a little bit of technical difficulties. So this word judgments here comes in, and throughout the Old Testament, it's got a numerous amount of translations. It's mostly translated justice, ordinance or ordinances, or judged, judgment. There are a couple of rarer cases where it gets translated custom, right, rightful rights, sentence, sentenced, cause, case, procedure. Overwhelmingly, though, the sense of what's coming, the sense of what's happening with this word is that in Isaiah 26:8, it's this: indeed, while following this kind of procedure, this what God has declared for the behavior, beliefs, and thoughts of his people. It's this: indeed, while following all that you have commanded, we have waited for you eagerly. And so the following the way of God's truth, it's this all-encompassing entity. It's this complete obedience to all of God's commands about everything that we can be commanded about. And so then we get into the last half, right? Your name, even your memory, is the desire of our souls. And so now we're going to take a look at the word memory. There we go. Okay. So apologies, I do not know Hebrew, so I am not saying these words out loud. I'm just talking about them. But anyway, so this Hebrew word here, it's the word that gets translated into memory or renown in verse 8. It's most commonly translated as memory. It's occasionally translated as renown or memorial or mention or remembrance or remembered, or even name again. So then we go down and in logos, I can get a look at the sense of the word. It's oftentimes kind of a past tense. This is a very rare word. We're looking at maybe less than 60 usages in the Old Testament. It is very, very important to get the sense right. And so basically what I'm seeing here in verse 8 is it's this declaration. Verse 8 is a declaration that while the people of God are following all of God's commands, they are walking in the way of God, they are pursuing obedience to all of God's commands, they are waiting eagerly, they are waiting upon God. They are waiting for God with a eagerness. They want God. They're waiting for God to come. They want God to be here. They're ready for him to be here. And so the desire is it's this your name and your memory is the desire of our souls. It is this going into verse 9, we get a little bit of insight into what exactly is happening in that passage. At night, my soul longs for you. Indeed, my spirit within me seeks you diligently. For when the earth experiences your judgments, the inhabitants of the world learn righteousness. So it's this idea that it's the very presence of God that they are longing for. It's the name of God that the name of God would be in and around them and would be being spoken. It's the memory, the remembrance, the renown, the glorification of God. Um, and and it's this longing within the spirit. And there's a couple things we can learn from this verse in application of our lives is that when our heart posture is right, when our heart posture is longing for God, it becomes easier to love and understand and and care about his ordinances and his commands. When our heart is in the right place, there is a joy and delight that comes with obedience. But it's only when our heart is in the right place that that can happen. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the video. So what she talks about kind of in the first 2 minutes is primarily the passion verse, and then she talks about in the idea that we want God to be famous, but that he already is, and that something that she has learned over the years, and that's something that she is really starting to get into in her own devotional life, is that God was famous. Jesus was famous while he was on earth. There is this, and she makes a great point in that. There are so many people who do not understand that Jesus wasn't just nobody. He wasn't some guy out in the middle of nowhere doing his thing. He was somebody who was known. By the time he was on the cross, he was a known entity. Then there were people who were unfamiliar with him. They didn't know him, but they knew of him. And that's the important distinction that she's making, is that it's not that he wasn't known, it's that he was known and people knew of him. There's a difference between knowing somebody and knowing of somebody. And many people knew of Jesus. And a great many people know of Jesus today. There are a great many people in the church who merely know of Jesus. But for disciples and believers, that's like baby step one. Okay, great, you know of Jesus, but do you actually know him? That's where we get into discipleship. But I'll save my thoughts on that for later on. Let's go ahead and get back to the video. I'm already at 16 minutes. These are probably going to be some long videos going forward, especially once I've got the tech stuff worked out. All right, so this is Mark 6:54. We're going to go back into my Logos software. It's a Bible study software. Great, love it. If you can afford it, use it. They do have a free package. It doesn't have as many bells and whistles as mine does, though. I've spent some serious cash getting mine to where it's at. So this is Mark 6:54. Come on. Thank you. All right, sorry about that. My computer's being really slow for some reason. All right. This is Mark 53 through 56. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored to the shore. When they got out of the boat, immediately the people recognized him and ran about that whole country and began to carry here and there on their pallets those who were sick to the place they heard he was. Wherever he entered villages or cities or countryside, they were laying the sick in the marketplaces and imploring him that they might just touch the fringe of his cloak. As many touched it were being cured. So what I want to do is, rather than go through and explain everything that's going on here, because Sadie does a great job of that, and I will be uploading likely a recording of me watching this video. So if you don't have access to the Passion videos already, you can get access on their website, or you can wait around for me to upload some additional thoughts with the recording of the video. But anyway, so setting what actually is going on here, I want to point out a couple of things that are in the Gospel of Mark as kind of in the language that we see in verse 54. So in the Gospel of Mark, there's this rushing pattern. The time is flying by. It's immediately, as soon as it is constantly moving at an incredible pace. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting about what Sadie is talking about is she's talking about fame. And the Gospel of Mark kind of has that, like, constantly rushing about. It is really interesting to me that she focuses in on this set of verses where we are seeing this speed of movement, constantly going places, people constantly following. It's an incredible verse to choose for her topic. And that's it's just a phenomenal choice. So kudos, Sadie. That this is a phenomenal choice of scripture to really look at Jesus's fame. It's the pacing in the Gospel of Mark shows that he was, kind of always busy in some senses, and he did escape away for silence, and that's visible in other parts of the scriptures. But in generally speaking, in his time of ministry, he was always moving. And so this is just a fantastic verse for her topic. Yeah, let's go ahead and get back in. All right. So in the next section, some of what she talks about is she kind of goes over and talks about the fame of Jesus that you can see in that passage. She does a great job about that. But the one thing that I want to hone in on is something she doesn't talk about in this section. Um, she only speaks for less than 20 minutes. So this is not a negative towards her or her speaking ability. She's a great speaker. This is more something that I want to draw attention to because I think it's important. She talks about how we have this desire to be near and to like reach out and touch people who are famous, and we do. But how often are we like that with God? That's something that I've been really honing in on in my own devotional study in the last part of 2020 and the beginnings of 2021. Is just this idea of what does it mean to want to be near God. And I think that that's something we really have to be careful about. We really have to reflect on it. Um, she is doing an incredible job thus far. I mean, we're less than 5 minutes into a 15 or 16-minute session. So, I mean, she's doing a fantastic job. And there's so many things you can jump into on the deep end about this. Um, yeah, these videos are going to be long videos, especially when we get to some of the people like KB and Matt Chandler and Priscilla Shire, whose sessions were just, I mean, all of these sessions were just jam packed with things to kind of expound on. And so, yeah, with that said, we're going to go back into the video. I'm going to try and not pause as much this time and try to get at least to the halfway point. All right. I didn't make it to the halfway point for that. I apologize. But she lays out kind of three reasons why fame isn't necessarily negative by itself, but it can be negative. One is that when basically her first 2 points can kind of be put together. But if you are in a position of fame, as humans, we are not created to experience that health in a healthy manner. We just aren't. As humans, we don't really have a capacity for how to engage in that healthfully. But she brings up a great point in that, and Christine Kane talked about this several passions ago, based on what Sadie is saying, is that it's a if you find yourself in a position of fame, you have to be pointing to God in those spaces. Because if you're not pointing to God, all of that glory is going to you, which will inevitably pull you away from God. Some great examples of this is, Lecrae in recent months has kind of pulled away from being a gospel driven glory showing figure. He doesn't glorify God in the way that he walks in the world anymore. um I've heard some similar things have happened with the Christian rapper NF, in that he and I recognize that he doesn't like being necessarily called a Christian rapper, but that's neither here nor there. He is a Christian first and foremost, and so therefore I will call him by a Christian first and foremost, or at least that's how he was. It seems to me, based on some things that I've heard from a couple individuals in my church who are friends of his as well, that there may be some evidence floating around out there that he has kind of taken a step away from Christianity as more in an agnostic setting. um, I don't have enough stock in those claims to say he's no longer a professing Christian, but it's something to be aware of because fame is dangerous. Fame isn't bad, but fame is dangerous. And I think that that's something that Sadie really articulates very powerfully. And in kind of the last portion of her session, she really highlights the motivations behind fame. And it is a incredible thing to witness how she really ties in this idea of if you are the desire to be famous isn't natural to the human. It is basically a supercharged need for attention. It is not natural to the healthy human. The need for fame is not natural to the healthy human. And I think it is incredibly interesting to hear her talking about that. One of the things that I want to point out that she talks about, and this is where I might draw a little bit of controversy from some of you passion guys and girls, is that I don't think the way that she talks about God's interacting with you is 100% on point. Um, she talks about, and from kind of like that preaching talk of like, well, not saying that she is God, but more like declaring something about the way God interacts with you. And I don't think she was right in that. I think there's in what she said, it's that, and it's mostly the word acceptance. She used this phrase that God accepts you. And I don't think that's very accurate. I think a better way to state it is that God accepts you apart from your sin. He doesn't accept you with your sin. If you have surrendered to Jesus, your sin is not visible to God anymore because it has been removed from you. That stain is no longer there. And so I do want to say this. I do not hear me wrong. Your sin is known by God. Your sin is known by God. And because it is known by God, Jesus had to die on the cross to take on the wrath of God for your sin. That is an incredibly important point. But I want to point out that if you are in Christ, if you are in relationship with God, because Christ has restored you to God on the cross, then it is more like your debts are no longer in your account. It's if we had to, you know, using a bank analogy, and all analogies have something wrong with them somewhere, but I'm using it to make a specific point. Is that sin is like a debt you can't get rid of, and God's the debt collector, right? God's like, yo, I'd love for you to be on this yacht or in this party or whatever, but you've got an outstanding debt to me, so I can't let you in. I can't let you into this experience because you have a debt. And what the cross does is it removes that debt. Jesus it Jesus steps into that situation, and it's like, hey, God, I, their debt is on me. I've paid it. That's what happens. It's not that it's not that the stain is not known, but that it has been removed from your account. It is not credited to you for justice. You do not bear the justice for that because the justice has already been laid on Christ. This has been basically a review of an in-depth review of the first half of Sadie's talk. I'm going to take a look at some tech stuff, and there's going to be a second video with her session and all of that stuff, and we'll pick up where I'm leaving off now, and it'll go through the rest of the video until her prayer. So this video is going to be 3 videos talking about Sadie, but the rest of them will be 2. So thanks for joining me, and yeah, have a great day.